As we get into the colder months of the year, I like to cozy up with a nice, big, thick, chunky book. And so today I have 5 big book recommendations for you guys to sink into over the winter months. So I think in 2020, I made a few videos on my channel about how to read big books, like if you're intimidated by them, like how to move through them a little bit easier and conquer your fear of them. I gave some recommendations and I also did like a TBR of big books that were on my radar that I really wanted to read. I did intend to keep bringing you guys recommendations of big books because I personally love them. Like the bigger the book, the better in my opinion, and it has come to the point now where I'm only really intimidated by a book if it's over like 800 pages. Now for the purpose of this video, I count a big book as something that is over 500 pages. So that is the minimum amount of pages that all of the books that I'm going to talk to you guys about today are. Now, as we are talking about big books, it does tend to be fantasy. Like fantasy books do tend to be a little bit larger. So the 5 recommendations I have for you are predominantly fantasy, but I have tried to mix it up a little bit. So we have different types of fantasy and also a sci-fi in here as well. I haven't taken word count into consideration here, so some of these books will be bigger than others because their word count will be significantly larger and the font will be smaller, so the page count will vary. But for the purpose of this video, it is books with a physical print size in the physical editions that I have here in front of me that are over 500 pages. So if you are scared of big books, I would say don't be, give them a try. The more story, the better in my opinion, especially when it does come to fantasy. Now, a lot of these are series, so you are tying yourself into a series of big books, but that's a good thing. If you are actually looking to tackle some bigger books, these aren't the biggest that I've ever read. I don't think we have anything over 650 pages here, so they're not the most intimidating books that you will ever see either. But getting into this in no particular order, we are going to be starting with fantasy romance, and I have The Crowns of Oaths and Curses, which is the first book in the Mortal Fate series by J. Bray. There is a caveat here in that I have heard that this series goes downhill with the second book, and I currently have only read book 1, which I did really enjoy. Not to say that there's no flaws, but I did have a really good time with it. This one in print form is 649 pages, and as well as that, if you're looking to get into this series, there are also 2 prequel novellas called The Sword and the Scepter, which are just under 100 pages each, that it is recommended that you do pick up before this one, which bumps this page count up, if you count those as part of the first book, to closer to like 850 pages. But in terms of this book, in terms of this series, we are following a fae and a witch who are fated mates. It is an enemies to lovers story though, because their people are currently at war. So we are following our 2 main characters as they know that they're mates, but as they also they don't even try to overcome their hatred of each other actually. They both kind of go into this situation reluctantly knowing that they hate each other, but also kind of believing in the fates. So our main female character is called Rook, and she is from this particularly sheltered coven of forest witches. And one day she returns home and she finds that all of her family and all of the people that she lived with in this community have been slaughtered. So to figure out what to do with her life next, she then has to make the journey with her brother to seek her fate, which tells her that she is the fated mate of a fae prince. So as you may have guessed from that, our male main character is a fae prince, and he is Soren. He absolutely despises witches. His family were killed by witches, and he has also seen his people killed and his lands fail to prosper because of a curse that the witches have put upon the fae and also on the lands. You find out a little bit more about their backstories and how they kind of get to this point in the prequel novellas, but at the start of this story they finally meet. Rook knows who Soren is, but Soren doesn't know who Rook is, so he immediately takes her into custody and keeps her imprisoned under the castle while he kind of breaks down his prejudice against the witches throughout the course of this novel, and she tries to help the people and help the land despite the vast amount of prejudice that she is facing from everybody around her, because of what the witches have done. Now, what Soren refuses to realize is that the witches as a whole are not responsible for what is going on here. There is somebody who has appointed himself as like the Witch King or the leader of the witches and has been corrupting and recruiting witches into his cause, and it is these witches in particular that are the enemies of the Fae. Witches in general are not terrible people. So this definitely comes with its flaws. I thought that Soren was a little bit too immovable in his ways. Like, he was very much stuck in his ways, and when you're reading a 600-page book that you know is a romance, it can be a little bit frustrating. But I am a big fan of a slow burn, and this series is so slow burn that it is not even romantically inclined for the entirety of this book because of how much our main characters truly hate each other. So if you are looking for something that's romantic, that is low on spice, especially at the beginning, I can't say like what happens later on, but is low on spice or has a lot of time for character development and characters to kind of grow towards each other at a very, very, very slow pace, then I think that you might enjoy this one. It is also a little bit compulsively readable in the way that I find a lot of indie fantasy romance to be. Not a lot is happening, the pace is very slow, but it is still very absorbing, and it's like an easily digestible writing style. So if you're new to big books but you're familiar with fantasy romance, I feel like something like this could help you read something a little bit bigger. The next book is one that I've been recommending recently because I have just received the sequel. It has just been released. I haven't read it yet, but I very much want to. And that is The Pomegranate Gates by Ariel Kaplan. Now, this actually might be one of the smallest books, or the smallest book on this list, at 536 pages. It does not look like a big book, but technically it is, and the font isn't even that big, so we have a whole ton of story here. So this one is for fans of historical fantasy, as this one is set in a world that is inspired by medieval Spain at a time where this land is being converted to Christianity, and all of the Jews in the city have been told that they can either convert to Christianity or they have to leave. So we are following our two main characters, Naphtali and Toba. Our main female character, Toba, has an affliction where she can speak but she can't shout, and she can walk but she can't run. So as her and Naphtali separately join this caravan that is leaving the city, Toba starts to fall behind very easily, but she can't let anybody know that she's falling behind. And then Naphtali witnesses a man kind of escort Toba out of the crowd and towards the woods. So he obviously notices something untoward going on, and he follows Toba into the woods, where she escapes her attacker and disappears through the pomegranate gate into a different dimension. Naphtali then goes to find Toba's family and stumbles across her grandmother, and those two team up to try and find out what has happened to Toba and bring her back to their reality. Meanwhile, Toba is in this alternate dimension, which is very, very magical, and she is holed up in an estate with this reclusive lord and his, I'm pretty sure it's his nephew, and they are unraveling a political magical plot while Naphtali and Toba's grandmother are navigating the real world, which is currently being torn apart with this divide between Christianity and Judaism. What is happening in the magical realm is very much mirrored in the real world. This reminded me a lot of The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, mixed with a little bit of the vibe of City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So if either of those series are ones that you really enjoy, I feel like this will be very much up your street. Once again, this is a very slow moving fantasy, which is why I love it, with a very rich atmosphere and rich world building, which is something else that I absolutely adore. I am so excited to dive into the sequel to this, but I honestly really, really want to reread it because I loved it so much the first time around, and I'm hoping that I have time to do that very, very soon. My next recommendation is for people who like books that are a little bit faster paced, but I will say that because of the faster pacing of this one, while I very much enjoyed it, the details are a little bit hazier than they are for the rest of the books in this video, and that one is The Immortality Thief by Taryn Hunt. So if you have previously read things like Illuminate by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, I feel like you will have a really good time with The Immortality Thief because it is a fast-paced sci-fi horror that does have a lot of very similar elements to things like Illuminate. So this one is following a guy who I think is a linguist. He's a refugee, a criminal, and a linguist, linguist, and he is sent to explore an abandoned ship that is about to be destroyed by a supernova. However, he is not going to be alone when he explores this ship, because when he arrives, he swiftly finds out that the ministers are also there, which is a mysterious, undying alien race that has ruled over humanity for years. So when Sean kind of arrives on this ship to see what's what, he is immediately thrown into peril as the secrets of this ship start to reveal themselves to him, and at the same time he is on a race against the clock to discover what secrets this ship are hiding, what information on here is so valuable, as the ministers are also hunting for that information at the same time, and they are not afraid to use lethal force to get it. I love sci-fi horror. I think there is something so eerie and so atmospheric about like creepy, abandoned, decrepit wreckages of spaceships, and this definitely delivers on the atmosphere. This one is the first book in a series, and I believe that the sequel is being published next year. I have yet to decide whether I'm going to continue with the series, not because I didn't really enjoy this one, because I very much did, but just because aside from like the very last chapter, it does wrap up in a place where you could just read this as a standalone. Enjoy your time reading it, be thrilled by all of the horror elements and the fast-paced chase scenes, and then move on afterwards. Like, the choice is yours, but I definitely, if you're a fan of like sci-fi, horror, thrillers, faster paced stories, I feel like this one would be one for you. One that I legitimately never thought that I would be recommending on my channel is Babel by R.F. Kuang, because this is a book that I did not want to read. I thought that, and it is, I thought that this would be overly pretentious, and it very much is, but I didn't expect to also very much enjoy it. So this one is following a young man called Robin, who is from the Canton region of China. This book is set in the 1800s. I'm pretty sure it's like the, 1836. And Robin is taken from the Canton region of China by a mysterious English benefactor. So he takes Robin back to his home in England. He teaches him English. He teaches him how to be a perfect English gentleman. He takes Robin in as his ward, but his kindness comes with a price. And the reason why he is training Robin and bringing him up to speed with the rest of the fine young English gentlemen is because he would like him to train as a silver worker. And the reason why he wants Robin in particular is because Robin is fluent in Mandarin, and the way that the magic system in this world works is based on languages. So England and the rest of the world are running on these silver bars, which are manufactured by silver workers, where you put two words that mean the same thing onto a silver bar, and then the magic works within the gaps left by the translation. So obviously two words that mean the same thing can be slightly different in translation, and the magic works in the middle of those two words. So the more fluent you are in languages, the better a silver worker you are, because you have an innate understanding of this language. So Robin is presented with all of these fine things and raised in England just so that he can be a valuable silver worker, because England runs on these silver bars, and not just England but the British Empire as well. So the story really kicks off when Robin goes to Oxford, because up until this point he has been reasonably sheltered within his home, but he is sent to Oxford to start to begin his training. And this is especially poignant because not only is he one of the only people of colour at the university at this time, he is put into a class where he makes friends with a boy who is a little bit darker skinned than him, and also two women, and at this time women are also not allowed to go to Oxford. So we see this prestigious university through the eyes of characters that are not wanted there and are only tolerated because they serve a purpose that nobody else can serve. Like, Robin is only allowed to be there because he is fluent in a language that white people aren't. So this really critiques things like colonialism and racism and the British Empire, and kind of how those threads, like from racism, colonialism and the British Empire, are still present today, and how they manifest in places like Oxford and other privileged institutions. So the thing that I really liked about this was the story and the characters. I think that R.F. Kuang did a really good job with making this atmospheric and immersive. This this one is 542 pages with quite small font, so it is a big chunky book, and it has a lot of world building. Oh, it has a bookmark in it as well, a Babel Illumicrate bookmark, so I'll take that out. But it does have a lot of detail, a lot of exposition, a lot of detailed descriptions, so it does lend itself to being a little bit of a slower read. But for me, the writing was just so absorbing that I actually got through this in just a few days. Not to say that everybody's experience will be like that, but I felt like R.F. Kuang did a really good job with the atmosphere and the intrigue throughout this one. The thing that I don't love so much about this is that I feel like the author really inserts herself into the text. So there are multiple instances in here where something bad will happen, or somebody will say something maybe racist to Robin, and instead of the racism being kind of inferred within the text, like all of the characters will gather to have a conversation about this racist thing just happened and why it's racist and why it's bad, which I did feel was a little bit heavy-handed and a little bit patronizing, because this book definitely makes you feel uncomfortable with the way that some of the characters are treated. And I feel like the power of this book and the power of books like that are making you feel uncomfortable, and you having to kind of figure out what it is about this that makes you feel uncomfortable and really confront those hard truths yourself about colonialism, racism, and things like white privilege. There are also footnotes in here, which is where it really did feel like author insert. Like, it felt like R.F. Kuang was explaining bits of the text to you that maybe not saying that she felt this, but it comes across as though she feels you're too stupid to understand what is going on in the paragraph, that you need to be pulled aside to this footnote to have it explained to you. So those are the bits that I didn't love, but overall I feel like this is definitely a perfect autumnal read, and it is so rich in atmosphere with a beautiful writing style that I really would recommend it. And then the last book that we have for this recommendation video is potentially my favorite book of the year. I haven't quite decided yet, but it was definitely, like, there's very little criticism that I can give this one. I enjoyed it so much, and that is of course The Will of the Many by James Islington. Now this one is a slow read that took me a long time. It has very small text in here, and it does also stand at 620 pages, so it's not the biggest book that I've read, but James Islington is really making use of every single millimeter of this page in here with how small the font is. I mean, if I show you, I don't think it looks ridiculously small, but it definitely felt like it when I was reading. Not to say that this wasn't so absorbing that it completely swept me away. So this one, I'm hoping I can give you a more concise synopsis than I did when I talked about this in my wrap up when I read it recently. But this one is the first book in an adult epic fantasy series that is based in a world inspired by the Roman Empire with a magic system that has been modeled on a pyramid scheme. So that's like the SparkNotes version. But in this one, we are following a boy called Viz, who is a member of a royal family of a conquered kingdom. So this country called Catan, which essentially I think stands in for the Roman Empire, has swept through all of its surrounding countries and absorbed them all and brought them into the hierarchy. Now the hierarchy is the magic system in this world, and it is based on a pyramid scheme. So you have 8 different levels, and each level cedes will to the level above it. So there is a diagram at the beginning that gives you the rankings of Catan. So it tells you how many people are receiving will from how many people below, and obviously the higher up the pyramid you are, the more powerful you are. And will is essentially the will to live. So anybody on the bottom of this pyramid, which is most of the world, are very weary and run down because they are giving will to the people above them. So Viz does not believe in this system, one, because it destroyed his country, it destroyed the place where he's from, but also he just generally thinks that it's wrong. That being said, all he really wants to do with his life at this point, after his entire family have been killed, is just find a life of peace and quiet for himself where he can live outside of this system. So at the minute he's 19, he's living in an orphanage, and he is working as a prison guard, and then during the night he goes to fights and he competes in fights to win a little bit of money that he hides away to potentially pay for a life for himself in the future. One day a Quintus, who is like the 5th from the top level of the pyramid, comes to this prison where he works and asks to see somebody in there. So Viz takes them down, and because he is actually a member of a royal family, he is very well educated. So the Quintus, who is called Orkiskor, speaks to this prisoner in a dead language, which Viz, being very well educated, actually understands. Orkiskor notices this, and he ends up going to the place where Viz lives and adopting him to infiltrate a prestigious academy that is run by the religious tenet of this society. So the world, or the government, I guess, is split into 3 sections. There's military, religion, and governance. Governance? I'm pretty sure it's governance. We don't deal with that one very much because Orkiskor is from the military side and this academy belongs to religion. So Orkiskor believes that religion are doing something that is going to take power away from military. So he obviously wants to stop this and keep power for his own tenet, but then he also has an ulterior motive because he believes that the guy that is currently running the academy, who is called Viridius, was responsible for the death of Orkiskor's brother. Now, Orkiskor's brother supposedly committed suicide, and everybody believes that apart from Orkiskor himself. So he is sending Viz into this academy to compete with all of these children of the prestigious families of the world so that Viz can also explore what religion might be up to and also maybe get to the bottom of what happened to Orkiskor's brother, which Orkiskor does think is tied together. There is also a rebellious group in this world who are trying to destabilize the hierarchy, but when they make contact with Viz, he very much does not agree with the methods that they are using to achieve their goals. However, he is also dragged into their plots and their scheming, and he also just generally has his own agenda of doing really well in this academy so he can reach a rank prestigious enough that he never has to cede will or receive will from another person and become a part of this system that he hates. So there is a lot going on in here, but essentially Viz is being dragged around left, right, and center by all of these different groups while he's just trying to make it on his own at the same time. So it's just layers of like plots upon plots upon plots in this book. I really love this one though. Honestly, the only critique that I have of this book is that Viz is a very intelligent, very well educated, very gifted individual, and at a point in this book it kind of gets tedious watching him succeed at everything that he attempts. Like, it gets a little bit unbelievable, but aside from that, I adored this book. The world building is probably my favorite part because it's very similar to Brandon Sanderson in that we have a plot that is so complex and so layered in a world that is so complex and so layered that you have a really good understanding of this world moving through this book because of the way that James Islington like gradually feeds you little bits of world building, but then you still have room to be taken by surprise by the plot twist because you know that while you understand the world very well, it is much more vast than the knowledge that you currently hold about it. I would also compare this series, and so would everybody else, to Red Rising by Pierce Bryan, especially when we get into that academy setting. So if you are a fan of things like Red Rising, or you really like the writing style and the complexity of story from people like Brandon Sanderson, I feel like this book may be something that you're into. Also, the other series by James Islington, I've only read book 1, it's The Shadow of What Was Lost, the Lycanius trilogy, but I also really enjoyed that one and I kind of feel very similarly about it. This one is good because it has a lot of rich world building and quite a slow pace, but in a way that I felt never really got boring at any point. And it also has some faster paced moments. There's good action interspersed throughout to kind of keep the plot moving, but never in a way where it ever seems too slow or too rushed. This one is going to take you a hot second though, because even though I loved every second of my time reading this book, I think it still took me about a week to get through it. So there we have it. Those are 5 big book recommendations for you today. Let me know down in the comments if you are going to take me up on any of my recommendations, or if you have read any big books recently that you feel like you have the urge to recommend. Leave those down below. And if you guys would like to let me know that you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, then leave me a purple emoji down in the comments for the Immortality Thief. When I was making this list for this video, I actually just wrote down every big book that I felt like I could recommend, and I ended up with 15 in total because it's been so long since I've done a big books recommendation video. So do let me know as well if you enjoyed this video and whether you would like to see more big book recommendations from me in the future, because I very much do have them for you guys. They're locked and loaded and ready to go. But aside from that, guys, I do hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.